Chapter 13. What happens in the common room stays in the common room, an interlude. No one was expecting Eliza Potter, the girl who lived, to be sorted into Slytherin, that was apart from Potter herself. She sat at the end of the table with her head held high, shoulders straight, and brushing of Malfoy's murmured insults without batting an eye. She held herself like a pureblood would. She held herself like she's something dangerous. Theo knew before he had even stepped a foot into Hogwarts that he would always be at Malfoy's beck and call. Sure, their fathers were both Death Eaters, but Theo's was in Azkaban, which meant Draco. My father will hear about this. Malfoy had a lot more status than he did, a fact that he resented. But looking down the table at Potter made Theo think some things were going to start shifting. Theo had always been brilliant at chess. He could predict moves, use his strategies, and set traps like no other, and he thinks that no one is prepared for a player like Potter. The weeks go on. Lessons were boring, but at least he has Blaise to keep his company. Blaise was also another odd one. He and Theo had always known each other. All purebloods did on some level, but Theo didn't expect to spark such a friendship with the Italian boy. Blaise was loud and charismatic, the exact opposite of Theo's quiet and studious nature, but they balanced each other out quite nicely. It was a nice feeling, finally having a friend. Aside from Blaise, Potter was the only other form of entertainment he gets these days. She's intelligent, wickedly smart, with the magical power to boot. And she also seemed to take great pleasure in mocking Parkinson and Malfoy, a hobby he can get behind. He watched her curiously as she strides away from the Quidditch pitch, obviously intending to hole herself back up in the library. He has the oddest sensation that they were nearing a checkmate. That night Potter humiliates Malfoy in front of the entire house. The control she executes was formidable, and she has Malfoy lying at her feet with a few basic first-year spells. The next day he and Blaise approached her with offers of an alliance on their lips, and a hope to join her court, and Theo doesn't think he'll ever meet another person like Eliza Potter ever again. She's certainly one of the most entertaining. It seemed she couldn't resist causing chaos in Snape's classroom, and Theo was positive she pretended to be clumsy just so she had an excuse to drop things and create a ruckus. Charms was no different. Her reign of terror didn't end with the Wingardium Leviosa, and Theo found himself subjected to more and more to her ridiculous version of Charms practice. He didn't really mind that much. He was relatively new to this whole friendship thing, but he found he quite liked it. Of course, they're still hesitant around each other. She may be a Slytherin, but she's still the girl who lived. She had to know where at least Theo stood by now, but it still wasn't mentioned. That is until, of course, Samhain. Potter doesn't know anything about Samhain because of course she doesn't, and a troll is in the dungeons because of course it is, and he's the one who's left to explain everything to her because of course he is. But amazingly, she doesn't even seem fazed by talk of dark magic, or even the Dark Lord himself. And then she asks Flint how she could actually perform the oldie rituals, and Theo knew he has never been more right about anything than he had been about Eliza Potter. That girl doesn't just bend the rules. She changes the game. Blaise never expected to be jumped by a stupid Gryffindor when he walked the castle alone. He walked away with a black eye, a busted lip, and a bruised ego, and when he stumbled into the common room all he wanted to do was go to sleep. Instead, Potter stood up, and if Blaise didn't know any better, he would say he could see the flames of hell in her eyes when she demanded a name from him. He collapsed onto the sofa when she stormed out of the room, and he and Theo trade wary glances. His nervousness only increases when Potter comes back 10 minutes before curfew with a small mischievous smile on her face. When she came to sit next to him, she seemed more relaxed than she had in weeks, since her first confrontation with Malfoy. Even and Blaise worried over just what she had done to calm the violence that rested within her. And then they all hear the news that Cormac McLaggen was in the hospital wing. A charm backfired and removed all the bones in his fingers. Nasty business it was. When the boy spots Eliza in the hall that night, he paled like he's seen the devil himself, and Blaise honestly has no idea how to feel. He'd never had a father to care about him, never known who he even was. And his mother loved him, but his mother loved a lot of things, loved a lot of different men, which usually meant Blaise was at the back of a very long line. She loved him in the way one loved a family pet. He got treats for good behavior, but other than that was left to be forgotten. But this girl, this tiny slip of a thing, had taken one look at his bloodied face and had decided to send someone to the hospital wing in retaliation, and damn if that just didn't make him kind of want to cry. But instead of admitting that he returned to his favorite pastime of annoying Theo, emotional hearts-to-heart could wait. "What do you want for Yule?" Eliza asked one day as they relax in the commons. "I've never done this whole present thing before." Blaze stopped from where he was trying to finish his defense S and traded worried glances with Theo. This isn't the first time Eliza had brought up her less than stellar home situation. When Blaze had first learnt about the orphanage, he had had to stop himself from marching straight up to Dumbledore and punching him in his crooked nose like a feral 11-year-old muggle. "What do you mean, Eliza?" Theo asked in hopes that this time she would offer up more than the orphanage is horrible. Or one time I broke a kid's leg because he tried to break into my room, interesting pieces of information, but not quite what he was looking for. "I've never had anyone to buy presents for, or vice versa," she said as if that wasn't one of the most heartbreaking things he had ever heard. "We'd be happy with anything you get us, Eliza," Blaze said encouragingly. Eliza obviously doesn't understand what she said is absolutely heartbreaking, and Blaze resolves to get her the best present he can. He's glad he did when he receives his own. The wolf off his house crest stares out at him proudly, standing sentry on his bedside table. One of his mother's husbands had been suffocated in the night. He knows this because he had seen it. He had been 7 at the time. The little wolf makes him feel safer than he had in years. Theo felt like he was going to have an aneurysm because Eliza just won't stop asking questions. Not even normal questions. All questions were highly complex and on illegal topics which seemed to be Eliza's forte. Theo coped with it all the best he could, which is to say he doesn't cope very well at all. He and Blaze have taken to throwing Eliza at Forley and running while they still could. Eliza wasn't just full of questions about dubious areas of magic, however. She seemed to have made it her mission to know everything about he and Blaze that she could. The day she asked about Theo's mother, he got up out of the common room and walked away. Luckily, Eliza wasn't offended. She sat next to him on the sofa that night and held his hand softly in her own. "I'll never push you to talk about it, Theo," she murmured quietly, "but I'm always here when you need someone to listen." Theo asked if she wanted to play a game of chess before he started crying. It's easy to forget, when they're around Eliza, that every day is a battlefield in Slytherin. But their peace can never last too long. When Theo heard that the underclassmen court wanted to attack Eliza, he instantly reached for his wand. 3rd years against a 1st year. It was ludicrous. But Eliza doesn't let them get involved. She ordered them to stand down, and Theo could only watch as she faced against the court. Could only watch her as she won. Because she's vicious. He had known on some level that she was before, but he could never have believed this. And when she made Rosier bow with her force of will alone, Theo is reminded of the bedtime stories his grandfather used to tell him. Of a Slytherin with such a control over magic it was scary. Of a boy with dark hair and a sharp smile that had people bowing at his feet, that in the face of such power you knew you were witnessing history being made. Looking at Eliza, as she claimed the underclassmen court for herself, he thinks he finally understands what his grandfather meant. Daphne had been watching Eliza Potter for a while, and she couldn't say she was surprised when the other girl finally took over the underclassmen court. But she was surprised when she got accepted into it. As far as Daphne knew, she had no desirable skills. She's good at gossip, but Blaze was good at that. She's the Greengrass heir, but everyone in Slytherin was an heir of something. She's just another pureblood girl destined to be married off to the highest bidder. And so, she really couldn't understand why someone like Eliza Potter would look at her and see something worth keeping around. But Daphne went with it anyway, because Eliza was the one thing that could maybe take her somewhere other than a wedding altar and a mansion full of children. So Daphne contributed her opinion in their court meetings and acted more confident than she felt. She taught Eliza cosmetic charms passed down from mother to daughter through every family, and ignored how sad she felt when she realized this was the closest Eliza was ever going to get to that experience. Daphne sat on her bed and coaching her through quick and easy hairstyle charms. The more time went on, the more Daphne felt like an imposter. Theo was so clever, his mind was sharp, and over the weeks he produced contingency plan after contingency plan for all of Eliza's ideas. And Blaze was brilliant. He boosted their image. He charmed and connived his way into conversation, knew exactly what to say to spread word around the castle or to keep something a secret. And Daphne's just Daphne. All those thoughts catch up to her when she's in the common room one night. It's late, and no one's up, and before she realized it, she was crying. And then before she realized it, Eliza was sat right there next to her. Eliza doesn't like touching people. It's something she's noticed over the weeks. She flinched away from hugs, tensed when Blaze's arm draped across her shoulders, but still, now, she reached over and took Daphne's hand into her own. She looked uncomfortable, but she also looked like hell, nor could high water stop her from staying with Daphne. "Now are you going to tell me what's wrong?" she said softly. And Daphne did. When her confession was done, Eliza simply sat with her until she stopped crying. And when her cheeks are dry, Eliza began to speak. "You don't need to offer me anything, Daphne. You're my friend, and that alone makes you special in my eyes. And one day, you're going to take the world by storm. I just know it." That was the thing with Eliza Potter. She spoke to you, and your only choice was to take her words as gospel. The next day, Daphne sat down at the table feeling more confident than she has all year. Theo and Blaze give her knowing looks, and she simply grinned in response. She had finally found her place here, and she wouldn't let anything ruin it. Blaze had known fear before. His mother killed her husbands. He knew what it was like to live with a murderer. He knew fear whenever his mother introduced a new stepdad. Knew fear whenever his mother cooked them dinner, and wondered if today was the day she decided she wanted a new heir as well. But Blaze didn't think he had quite known fear until he had seen Eliza Potter, little, tiny Eliza Potter, almost murder a man in the slithering common rooms. She handled it easily, and he finally saw the violence she kept hidden away from them. He thinks he finally understood how she went up against the Dark Lord last year and won. Blaze knew he would never fully understand Eliza, but he thinks at least now he knew enough about her to understand how she feels. He has spoken to her long enough to understand that she feels different from the rest of them, has seen her watching them as they pull each other in for hugs, knew that she thought herself a monster. So when she claimed her place as Queen of Slytherin, Blaze strode over to her, slung an arm over her shoulder because he knew she wouldn't accept anything more, and tried to tell her without words that everything's okay. He can tell she doesn't get it right now, doesn't understand that they know exactly who she is, and they're still willing to stand with her. But one day she will. He just has to keep showing her. Not even Eliza's takeover of Slytherin can stop lessons from happening, and so they all still have to suffer through Lockhart's teaching, although he uses the word loosely. The only thing that made the lessons bearable was Eliza herself. Blaze had gotten quite a few laughs out of the commentary she had scrawled in her textbooks. A gaggle of ghouls. I doubt Lockhart could even win against a gaggle of geese. Who is this man's editor? I would like to have words, a bit of polite conversation, perhaps even a bit of bludgeoning using these offending books as the weapon. At least then they would be officially criminally bad. Fake spell count, 36, hope for humanity steadily decreasing. On one notable occasion, Lockhart had asked Eliza to play the helpless maiden as he reenacted his books. It was perhaps the best lesson of Blaze's life. "Now, Eliza," Lockhart said from the front of the class, "the Yeti is coming towards you and you scream for help." "Ah," Eliza said, voice flat and monotone, "please help me, Mr. Lockhart. This Yeti might tear me apart." She recited drolly, sending despairing looks over to Theo. "A bit more enthusiasm, please, Eliza." Blaze didn't know if it were possible for Eliza to become even less enthusiastic, but she somehow managed to anyway. Lockhart eventually gave up and sent her back to her seat, calling up Hermione Granger instead. Eliza kicked him when he started laughing at her. Worth it. And then the chamber is opened, and suddenly nothing is the same. When they found out Dumbledore tried to expel Eliza, Daphne was furious. She immediately started campaigning for Eliza to reveal the headmaster's actions, to start a smear campaign or go to the school boards, but Eliza wouldn't listen. Instead, she smiled indulgently, as if she knew something Daphne didn't, and gently brushed off her concerns. It was obvious Eliza wouldn't let her fight her battles for her, so instead she looked after her in other ways. She made sure Eliza ate something else other than strawberries for breakfast, made sure she took breaks from their planning. Daphne conferred with the prefects over in-house issues before Eliza could, snuck piles of essays from her so Daphne could mark them. Anything to ease her burden. Daphne knew Eliza knew what she's doing, but she doesn't put a stop to it. So Daphne carried on and knows that her efforts are appreciated through the soft brush of shoulders, a cup of tea waiting for her at the table just the way she likes it. It's a quiet, steady friendship, and Daphne wouldn't give it up for the world. She, Blaze, and Theo start plotting on how to take on more of Eliza's responsibilities, and soon they've reached out to the whole house. Eliza's no longer bothered by petty squabbles or small inconsequential queries, and if anyone says anything about their queen, well, they were dealt with swiftly and quietly. And Daphne wasn't sure if it was thanks to their efforts or something else, but Eliza soon seemed happier. She reached out to them more, joked and laughed and smiled when they're not looking instead of having that hollowed-eyed look she carried before. And then Malfoy went and forced Eliza to reveal her Parselmouth abilities to the rest of the school. She couldn't believe this was the boy her parents wanted her to marry. Daphne's itching to cause some damage, and she knew Blaze and Theo felt the same, but instead Eliza ordered them to step down. The next day Malfoy was sitting with them, on his way to joining the court, and Eliza seemed content to let everything that had happened be forgotten. Daphne wasn't. She, Blaze, and Theo cornered him in the common room when Eliza was in their dorms, probably writing in the diary she thought none of them knew about. Draco eyed them nervously, and Daphne quietly lets him know in no uncertain terms that if he ever made one single move to hurt Eliza, then Daphne would make what happened to Blishwick look peaceful in comparison. Draco nodded hurriedly in response, and Daphne smiled, cheerfully asking if he's up for a game of chess. She knew Eliza thought she was a monster, but in Slytherin they were all wired a bit differently than the rest. Draco did not expect to be accepted into Eliza's court so easily. It was nice, he thought over breakfast one day. It was nice knowing you had people you could depend on, nice knowing that at least around them he could drop his masks. He fit in seamlessly, and he found in Eliza's court of misfits he had found real friends. He felt happier than he had in a while. To Draco's father, his happiness didn't matter. Consorting with Potter was disappointing the Malfoy name, and Draco was acting shameful. But Draco knew it wasn't actually about that. After all, Eliza was heir to House Black, and even though the Potters were considered new money, they had still been influential purebloods. No, it was because Potter had destroyed their lord, and his father would always place Voldemort over the family name. But Potter was a half-blood, and was the most powerful in their entire house. So perhaps his father was also wrong about pureblood ideology. Perhaps he was wrong about a lot of things. And so Draco had refused to go home for Yule, whilst his father was determined to berate him from sullying the family name. He had simply told everyone else they were fighting, but they all seemed to understand anyway, even if they didn't question him. It was late Yule night, after they had finished terrorizing Weasley and Granger, that Eliza brought it up. "I wouldn't blame you, she said absently, staring into the fire. "If you wanted to leave now, spare your family the disappointment." "I'd get it." Her voice was soft, betraying no emotion, and Draco's heart clenched over how easy she accepted possible abandonment. "I'm a Malfoy," Draco said, and ignored how quiet he sounded in the empty common room. "But I'm also a Black." At that, she finally turned to look at him, vibrant green eyes open wide. "And that means you're my family too," he declared, and watched as a wide, happy smile split across her face. "Besides," he said, sniffing pompously to try and alleviate the heavy atmosphere of the room, "Malfoys don't bow to anyone, not even each other." Eliza chucked a pillow at his head, and Draco fell back with a laugh. "He may be on the outs with his family, but he's found a new one here at Hogwarts all by himself." Draco looked up from painting Daphne's nails when he heard Eliza start speaking. He had no idea when Daphne had started making Draco paint her nails, but he did know that every Sunday they both sat next to the coffee table whilst Daphne gossiped and Draco painted. Draco finished the last nail, Slytherin green, because house pride was the only thing that sustained them at this point, and tuned into the conversation. "The public should know what Dumbledore has done to this school," Theo commented from the sofa that Draco was leant against. "They shouldn't they?" Eliza said pensively. "Scheming face." Draco asked as they all watched Eliza seemingly stare into nothing. Definitely, Daphne said back, fanning her nails. Pansy Parkinson, Snape said, and Theo feels his heart plummet. The heir of Slytherin had taken one of their own into the chamber. For all they knew, she was already dead. Theo felt sick. "Where are you going, Eliza?" Theo asked nervously when he saw her stand up, a determined expression on her face. He prayed to Lady Magic that she wasn't going to do what he thought she was, and then prayed to Lady Magic some more when she does, and strides out of the common room. Theo doesn't know how long they all sit there, doesn't know how long he paced the room, frantic and worried and scared. Daphne's already crying in the corner, and Draco was holding her close, a pensive expression on his face. None of them speak. Instead, they wait, and Theo got the horrible feeling that they were waiting for someone who would never come back. There's a frantic energy thrumming through him, and he wished he knew where Eliza had gone, because he knew he would follow her without a second's hesitation. "It's been 3 hours," Selwyn said. Grim resignation is his voice. It sounded like a death knell, and Theo had to swallow thickly around the lump lodged in his throat. Daphne let out another sob. And then the common room door opens, and there's Eliza. "Pansy's safe," she said, as if that's why Theo is close to tears. She's covered in mud and slime, and Lord knows what her hands were shaking, and she looked tired, and Merlin had she always been so small. Theo slammed into her, wrapping her in his arms, and Theo thought he could cry with how relieved he was. "Don't ever do that again," he said sternly, and tightened his grip on her when she laughed softly. He has no idea what she's actually done yet, and he knows that story will give him another heart attack. But having Eliza alive and safe in his arms was more than enough for now. He would worry about everything else later.